Welcome back to Spirit Man Studios, and today we're going to be talking about Jordan Peele's new film, Us.
Be careful.
Now, one thing that can be said of most movies out there that get a sequel or even a director who makes another film is that usually they kind of have what is considered to be a sophomore slump. And more recently, one of the recent examples of this is something like Age of Ultron back in 2015. A lot of people seem to think that that movie was a complete disaster, although it was basically the first Avengers movie but with less charisma than the first, but that's a different story altogether. And when it comes to new directors, a new film is generally considered to be another step forward in a director's line of vision. And because Jordan Peele, of all people, decided to have a benchmark so high with Get Out, that people seem to think that his next movie wasn't going to be that great. And, fortunately enough, it wasn't. It was really great. It was a really good movie. Us follows the Wilsons, a family who goes on vacation in Santa Cruz, and they meet up with a doppelganger family. And it's here that we have this twisting, twinding sort of story that mixes various elements of intrigue and ambiguousness, but to its own benefit. Now, films like Bird Box like to have this sort of meta narrative of, oh yeah, there's so many ways you can view that movie. But the problem with Bird Box was that the main narrative that it was trying to go for only shows up in the second half of the movie. Whereas the script for Us actually has a narrative through line. It has this conflict of interest between one side versus another. It's us versus them. It's, well, who is our enemy, really? The movie is structured in a way that's very interesting. I mean, in terms of the editing, they give you kind of a hint of what's going to happen in the first 10 minutes. And then they continue on and they just have this nice little story about the Wilsons going to the family home. And then, the doppelgangers show up, and the rest of the movie is them trying to avoid these doppelgangers. And more of the mystery slowly unfolds. Now, yes, there is kind of a mystery as to why these characters are these characters, but it's kind of ambiguous. I'd say about 75% of this movie is very ambiguous, and you have to go in knowing that there is a lot of ambiguity when it comes to certain things. There's certain things that Jordan Peele puts in, certain iconographies that he puts in, that is very much geared towards people to think about what these actually mean. What is he actually trying to say with certain things? I've picked up a couple of things, but I'm pretty sure if I were to go back through the entire movie with a different lens or a different way to view the movie, I would see it in a very different light. And there's a lot of things that are ambiguous, but there's certain things that aren't quite so ambiguous. Again, the main narrative through line is fairly obvious, but there's certain little branching paths that aren't so obvious. And it could, in effect, if you look at that main story and you look at these little side tangents, it could retroactively change the perspective of what you actually see in the movie. Now, there is one thing I had a problem with this sort of ambiguity, and that is the ending. I feel like the ending was way too pointed, and there's a movie called... in terms of ambiguous endings, there have been many good ones, right? Inception had the one with the top, whether or not it actually fell over, implying that Leonardo DiCaprio was either in a dream or in real life. Of course, one of the more famous ones when it comes to horror is The Thing by John Carpenter. The ending is so ambiguous that it leaves you thinking, who are these characters? Are either these characters aliens, or are they just the survivors? And they give you little hints and clues to point to certain things, but overall, what you choose to be the ending is what you choose to be the ending. It's nothing that the film fully confirms. They just give you a couple pieces to play with. And I wish the ending of this film had that. It was just way too pointed with the ending of certain characters. They keep flashing back and forth to certain events in the film. I wish it would have been left a little bit ambiguous for the ending, but there's plenty of stuff to really talk about with this film, such as certain iconographies like white rabbits. There's like this frisbee thing that comes in towards the midpoint of the story. There's various different things you can point at, including color schemes of the outfits or anything like that. Now let's talk about the actors in the film. Lupita Nyong'o plays the wife in the film, and she's the central figure. She's the central character in this movie, and she plays the characters because she plays two characters. She plays them really well. I'm so glad Lupita Nyong'o is doing so well as an actress. She's been going from production to production, just killing it with her acting game, and I hope this doesn't turn out like Toni Collette with Hereditary, because I honestly think she's as good as Toni Collette in Hereditary. The way that she can go from two different characters. Sure, her voice when it comes to her doppelganger can be a bit weird. I think that's okay. But when it comes to her acting ability, as well as many of the other actors in this movie, I feel like she did some of the best work. Winston Duke is also in this movie as the husband, and he provides a lot of the comedic, balancing. Whenever there is a quiet moment in this movie, where the characters are in downtime, there will be some jokes that are levied in the movie, and it does break up some of the tension of the film. And I don't really think any of that is really a detriment to the film at all, because I do think it adds a little bit more of a humanity to these characters. But then again, and that sort of differentiates the doppelgangers from the actual characters in the movie. But even then, they kind of have something that happens that kind of twists that perspective just a tiny bit. There's certain things that happen in the movie with the doppelgangers that are very interesting, and I wish I could talk about more, but spoiler free, right? And let's also talk about the costumes. One thing that I felt was striking, both in the trailers and the posters, and even in the movie, is what I think Jordan Peele has done with the doppelgangers is something that I think is iconic. I don't think I could ever think about this film without thinking of the golden shears and the red jumpsuits. And I think that's a testament to how creatively interesting Jordan Peele is as a director and as a producer. The way he writes this story is also very interesting to really examine. There's themes of, who's really the true enemy. There's just tons of themes that I could talk about. But if I were to, I'd give away certain spoilers. But it's like, there is this, mainline story in the entire thing is an us versus them narrative. It's not entirely subtle, and they kind of point out to it, but it's still the mainline thing. It's still an us versus them narrative throughout the entire thing. But that gets twisted on its head various times in the movie. In terms of the film score, my God, I really enjoyed the film score. The opening title sequence, that whole orchestra and choir section, like it brings about kind of like this Omen. It reminded me of the Omen in terms of the score, right? And certain other elements of the score was pretty good too. And that's not talking about the pop songs that are in the film. I'm talking about like the actual orchestral work, and it's really good. And surprisingly, this is the composer's second film that he's done, and the first one was Get Out, which I thought the soundtrack for that was kind of good. But now Us, like I think the soundtrack was really good. Now, the ultimate question is, would I recommend it to anyone? Kinda. If you're a big fan of Jordan Peele, you'll like this movie. It is a bit brainy. For any people who don't like, to think real hard about movies, don't go watch this movie. But this movie has a lot of really smart stuff about it, and you can view it in many different ways. But I really enjoyed this movie. There's various things you can point at and really discuss heavily about, such as the themes or the iconography or what the story really is, or what's with the rabbits or anything like that. There's so many things you could talk about with this film, aside from the ending. You can't really talk much about the ending. But I went with my sister last night to go see it, and we both really liked it. I think most of the audience really liked it. I think, between this and Get Out was more of a social commentary film, a social commentary thriller film, and Us is more of a horror, more thought-provoking horror film that doesn't rely on cheap jump scares, but it relies on the themes that it's telling to make you feel scared. I think that's what Jordan Peele was really setting out to do with this film. And granted, I could be wrong. I could be fully wrong. But I really enjoyed Us. Us is one of the best films of the year so far. It probably won't make fully my top 10, but it might, considering this year might not be that great after all, but who knows? And I'm going to give Us an A. This was really good. This was a really good movie, and I highly suggest you all go check it out. My name's been Nicholas Jennings, and this has been your review for the week. Check back tomorrow for an episode about Hellboy. See you in the next video.